It's a problem which every organization faces, small ones to grow big and big ones not to malfunction. And we've confronted that kind of problem many times in our 50-plus years running Singapore. And let me tell you a few which I have been associated with, and you get a sense of different ways you handle it in different situations. We built up the Singapore Armed Forces. We started off with 2 battalions. We now have maybe a couple of 100,000 troops, active and reserve, and tri-service. It was a painful process. We started off without officers able to run such a system, to grow such a system, to conceive such a system. And we were expanding and building up units and equipment without the concepts, the doctrines, the organizations, the tactics and strategies to make it work. What do you do? So what the government did then was it looked for young people who in the normal course events would never have gone into the armed forces. They would have gone and done tech or banking or something, gave them scholarships, sent them to university, made them officers, brought them back into the armed forces. Half a dozen a year. I was the first batch, there were 5 of us. Over 40 years, we infused the armed forces with young staff officers who had to make themselves not just scholars and bright young kids, but commanders and staffers who could be trusted with men and leadership and life and death roles. And therefore, gradually the organization transformed. It started off with them coming in and everybody looking very skeptically at them, and they say, those are scholars and we are farmers, which is like a red and blue divide, and very difficult to overcome. But gradually, the young people established themselves, and the farmer type, so-called, concluded that if you have a scholar, he can help you to do your work and run your unit and deliver the results better. And over several decades, we built up an organization which today is a professional, competent, technologically up-to-date, and credible outfit. So that's one way to change and build an organization. You put talent in, you merge them with the existing group, and over time you transform the nature of the outfit. Another way to do it is from the top. Sometimes you can do that. We did that with our banking industry when we decided we wanted to liberalize our banking industry and change the way we supervise the industry and the way we allowed companies to operate. So we changed, not by changing any organizations, but we changed by changing policies and moving in a few people into our monetary authority, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which supervises the banks. The staff remained, the direction changed. I went in as chairman. Taman, who's now Deputy Prime Minister, went in. He was my managing director. He was at first a staffer, and then he became managing director. And I moved in a new managing director, and I worked with the staff in the organization in about 2.5 years. We completely changed our approach in terms of what we allowed, in terms of what the market was responsible for, in terms of the risks we were prepared to take, in terms of our philosophy, whether you depend on the market or whether you depend on the regulator to decide what is allowed and what is not allowed to do. The staff supported it, worked with us, it worked. I give you a third example. Tax collection. Not a favorite example probably for this audience, but an interesting one because tax is in fact a very important function of a government. We started off with an Inland Revenue Division. It's part of the Ministry of Finance. It's a cost center. It receives salary and it collects taxes. And we complain bitterly about how slow, how backward, how uncomputerized, how inefficient it was. Nothing happened. So eventually we decided on a drastic solution. There was a change of leadership, but we decided to go back to the Bible. And the Bible tells you about tax collectors. It was a privatized function. And we looked around the world, and there weren't very many examples of privatized tax collectors still around. But we decided we needed to go to free up the organization so that it can function properly. So we cut it off from the ministry. We set it up as a statutory board, what the British will call a quango. We gave it autonomy. We made it a profit center. It collects a percentage, so many basis points on each of the taxes which it collects. So the more tax you collect, the more fees it gets. It had autonomy to recruit, to computerize, to change the procedures. Today, Singaporeans, I think to say that they enjoy paying taxes is an exaggeration, but it's less of a pain here than anywhere else in the world. I give you a fourth example, telecoms, because you know about that. It used to be a government department. Then we made it a statutory organization called the Telecoms Authority of Singapore. It did everything. It had a monopoly on mail, on phones, on long-distance calls, and it also regulated itself. And we, at one time, came to believe that what is good for telecoms is good for Singapore. But it was not true. So we decided to, in this case, that the right solution was to push it out into the private sector. We regulate, private sector operates. We will privatize this, in the process of which we decided we would give shares to Singaporeans at some favorable friendship prices so that they all feel that they have a share in the distribution. And we cut it off. As a result of which the telecom sector has now grown. We've now got 3, 4 telcos and free competition. It would not have happened if we had stayed a government department, but we really didn't do it as thoughtfully as we should have done because we had no experience. So we thought that we'll just cut it off and it's a company and then we will oversee it. But we did not think through what the industry structure should have been, which parts are natural monopolies, the national backbone of the network, should you want to give it to the telco, the tunnels and the ducts, who should own that? What should be the monopoly rights which goes with the new company? So we ended up, I think, with a deal which from the point of view of the company was very satisfactory, but from the point of view of the country, we should have been bolder. We should have taken away the monopolies, we should have opened up the markets, we should have kept the common services separate as national infrastructure and allowed competition more extensively, but in a managed sort of way. We didn't do that right. The next major privatization we did, where we again wanted to change, was power. And this time we were saved from ourselves because we were going to do about the same as it did for the telcos. But after we formed the company, we did the accounts up to proper commercial standards and found that they were not quite as brilliantly attractive as we thought they were. So we had to pull back our schemes, we had to rethink our plans, and the rethink of the plan meant that we spent the next 10 or 15 years restructuring the industry, fundamentally, broke it all up. We have a grid, we have a market, we have power generators, we have power suppliers, we have parts contestable, parts still regulated, and now we've got a restructured organization which I think gives us competitive electricity rates. So change is always hard to do, never an easy exercise and never a final position. But unless you make these changes, you're going to find yourself more and more antediluvian, out of touch, and no longer functioning. That's just changing in response to world changing and new needs. Sometimes we must change because you've made a mistake and you've got to find some way to acknowledge that and move forward. That's another big subject for another occasion.